Hey guys, today I'll show you an apocalyptic horror TV series named The Rain, Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a brief recap of the previous season, where the sky suddenly poured down heavy rain, and inexplicably, people started collapsing onto the ground. The rain carried a deadly virus, and anyone who came into contact with it would die instantly, causing an apocalypse on Earth. The Apollon biotech company intentionally spread the virus through artificial rain and had managed to find a carrier of the antibodies they needed for their further experiment. They were about to dive deep into research when the carrier, Raz, showed signs of high infectivity, causing chaos throughout their base. During the chaos, Raz's older sister, Simone, managed to rescue him. However, they were now in a virus isolation zone, controlled by the Apollon company, and the siblings had to keep evading capture. Their companion, Patrick, relied on his excellent driving skills to get them through another crisis. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, a large group of hunters blocked their way. Faced with the dark barrels of guns, they could only raise their hands in surrender. But then, Simone's scientist father, who worked for the Apollon company to develop the virus, emerged from a car. Ignoring the opposition from his colleagues, he insisted on speaking to his daughter. He secretly gave Simone an address, claiming that the virus expert at that location was their best chance at eliminating the virus without harming Raz. If this expert also failed, they would have no choice but to kill Raz, or else the world could meet its doom. Before he could finish speaking, a gunshot echoed, and Simone's father fell, killed by a female colleague named Kira. It turned out that the company's boss had noticed his reluctance to harm his son Raz, and had instructed Kira to eliminate him if anything seemed amiss. It had taken Simone and Raz 6 long years to finally meet with their father, and now he was gone. Raz was filled with an incredible rage. Without warning, the surrounding soldiers began convulsing violently before falling dead. Martin seized this opportunity, wrestled a weapon away, and started fighting back. The hunters, caught off guard, were beaten back. Simone and the others quickly jumped into a car and sped away. Martin knew their pursuers would catch up soon, so he instructed the others to get out of the car while he continued to drive. After some distance, he jumped from the moving vehicle, successfully shaking off their pursuers. After reuniting with the main group, they decided to head to the address given by Simone's father and seek help from the said virus expert. On their way, they passed by an abandoned supply station and decided to search for supplies before continuing. Meanwhile, Raz found himself standing before a mirror. Although no one had mentioned it, he knew something was off. He couldn't understand why the soldiers around him had gotten infected. Simone knew her brother was essentially a walking poison, but she feared he wouldn't be able to accept this truth, so she had chosen to keep it a secret. The previous victims had been infected through contact with Raz's bodily fluids. Simone thought as long as they were careful, there shouldn't be any risk of infection. But now, she was confused and couldn't figure out how the soldiers had been infected. Inside the headquarters of the Apollon company, the big boss learns that Raz had instantly infected several soldiers. Rather than being afraid, he becomes excited. After all, he had invented this virus, knowing it had superior adaptive capabilities. He believed that one day the virus inside Raz would become fully integrated into his body, just as easily controlled as his hands and feet. Now their task was to recapture Raz as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Martin and his group were examining a map. The address given by Raz's father was not nearby. They would need to cross an entire strait by boat and then walk for a few days after reaching the shore. As they traversed through a jungle, they stumbled upon a strange tree. It was pitch black, and beside its roots lay a rotting corpse. Driven by curiosity, Raz took a closer look. The tree was covered in dark fluid and its leaves seemed to be alive. Suddenly, his sister called out to him, warning him not to get too close to this peculiar tree. The group didn't dare to linger and quickened their pace. However, not long after, they encountered another black tree. Underneath it stood 2 figures in hazmat suits who seemed to be scientists and knew a lot about the tree. They advised Martin's group to keep their distance, revealing that the tree had also been infected by the virus. The virus was so powerful it could coexist with a plant host. These 2 were there to cleanse the area of the virus. They ignited their flamethrowers and began to burn the black fluid. Suddenly, Raz felt an intense pain, as if his body was on fire. Simone sensed that it might have something to do with the flames and promptly ordered Raz be moved away. As they put some distance between themselves and the black tree, Raz's pain disappeared. The female scientist among them, named Phi, found it very strange that Raz could still be alive and active despite being infected with the virus. so she decided to take Simone and the others to their secret research base for further study. At first glance, the secret base looked like a colossal abandoned factory, but the basement was filled with advanced technology. It turns out this was a research lab dedicated to stopping the virus. Its founder, Jakob, was a renowned virus expert. Simone immediately recognized him as the expert her father had recommended. Excited after understanding their situation, Jakob wanted to sample Raz's body for testing first. Martin and the others, guided by the staff, began to explore the facility. The factory roof was equipped with a signal blocker that could ward off drones from the Apollon company. Solar panels and wind turbines ensured a constant supply of electricity. There were plenty of beds for rest. At its inception, the institution housed 80 people, but now only 12 remained. Seeing the shelves full of supplies, Martin felt they could live there forever. Jakob in the lab quickly produced preliminary test results. The virus inside Raz had integrated into every part of his body, but Jakob still had confidence that he could extract it. However, several trials would be needed first. Though he spoke lightly of it, he privately told his assistant Phi that he planned to forcibly extract some pure virus samples for antidote research. Phi knew that to do this, a spinal tap would be needed, and Raz's life could be at risk. But Jakob reminded her that their primary task was to develop an antidote. Phi was left speechless. Reluctantly, she tried to convince Simone of the gravity of the virus and the necessity to try some risky methods to eradicate it. At first, Simone didn't think the virus was a big deal until Phi told her that when the black tree was set on fire, Raz felt pain because he and the virus had formed a symbiotic relationship. All infected hosts would be connected to some extent. This revelation unsettled Simone, and she finally agreed to let them perform a spinal tap on her brother. Raz knew the procedure was dangerous. Uncontrollable trembling racked his body, and his sister's constant reassurance was the only comfort he found. When everything was ready, all unrelated parties were asked to leave the lab. Jakob, donned in a hazmat suit, instructed Raz to lie on the operating table before proceeding to extract spinal fluid with a syringe. The piercing pain caused Raz to convulse involuntarily. Quickly, Jakob realized something was wrong. The fluid he'd extracted from Raz was not spinal fluid, but a black liquid virus. It was at this moment Raz on the hospital bed started to convulse. Black smoke seeped from his body, spewing out like water from a faucet. The lab alarm sounded instantly. Simone, sensing something was off, rushed to the lab only to be met with a horrifying scene. All the lab workers had fallen to the ground, their faces twisted in death, no longer breathing. Only Raz, who had just regained consciousness, seemed unharmed, looking at the bodies in shock. Through the door, he asked his sister if he had infected these people. Simone knew the answer, but lied that it's the virus expert who accidentally spilled some samples, causing everyone to get infected. Her words were intended to comfort Raz and prevent him from being unjustly blamed and ostracized. In panic, Phi started to clean the lab with a disinfectant spray. They had to clean up as quickly as possible. After burying the deceased colleagues, Phi felt all was lost. All the research base's experts had fallen, leaving her alone. She didn't have the resources to continue studying the antidote herself. Simone, however, insisted that the work couldn't stop. If it did, it wouldn't just be her brother in danger, but the entire world. Suddenly, Simone remembered her father's computer, which held all the data and diagrams of the virus. Phi indicated that if she could get the computer, she might be able to continue the research. Simone decided to return home as soon as possible to retrieve her father's computer. She felt it would be unnecessary to bring a large group, and only Martin would accompany her. Before setting off, Simone visited Raz's room to inform him of the plan, telling him to rest and not wander around. Raz quickly noticed that his sister seemed to be consciously keeping her distance from him, even locking the door on her way out. He felt sad as he had a faint idea of what Simone was afraid of. On the rooftop, Martin instructed his partner Patrick to ensure the safety of Leah and the others, a request that annoyed Patrick. He complained that Martin was only fussing around with Simone, but not trying to get the implanted virus capsules out of them. Martin explained that this was one way to develop an antidote, which would also solve the problem with the virus capsules. Early the next morning, after bidding farewell to their companions, Simone and Martin embarked on their adventure. They consulted a map and found that Simone's home was quite a distance away. If they were to walk, it would take several days. Regardless, they were undeterred and prepared to face any crises. Simone and Martin tirelessly tread along the desolate highway. To save time, they chose to take the shortest route, avoiding detours whenever possible. After climbing over a fence, they arrived at a residential area. To Martin's surprise, they stumbled upon an uncontaminated water source. As they prepared to gather some, they quickly realized something was amiss. Someone was living here. Martin wanted to ensure Simone's safety and urged her to leave quickly, but they were a step too late. They found themselves at gunpoint. Martin explained that they meant no harm. They were just passing through. The bearded man appeared later to observe with his beard that the pair were unarmed and didn't seem like threats. Consequently, he instructed his beardless wife to lower her gun, showing an unexpected kindness in this post-apocalyptic world. That night, he even invited Martin and Simone to join him for dinner, offering his homemade spirits. Simone let down her guard and joined in the merry feast. Perhaps it was the happiest she had been in 6 years. The bearded man's wife suddenly asked if they had ever seen a boy who was wanted by the Apollon company for the reason that if they found him, an antidote could be developed. The woman's question froze the atmosphere. The faces of Martin and Simone turned grave. They hadn't expected the Apollon company to be hunting Raz worldwide. Martin changed the subject, praising the taste of the liquor. The bearded man was pleased, even gifting Martin a pot of his spirits for the road. However, the wife's question left Simone feeling unsettled. She found it difficult to sleep, and when she went to get some water in the middle of the night, she overheard the couple's conversation. Apparently, Apollon was not only pursuing Raz, but also Simone and her companions. The beardless wife wished to capture the inebriated Martin and Simone to turn them over to Apollon, but the bearded man disagreed. He felt they were friends, and it wasn't right to betray them. Upon hearing this, Simone returned to her room to wake Martin, but he was too drunk to respond. Simone returned to the living room, intending to secure a weapon first, but she encountered the bearded man's wife. Luckily, Simone was quicker to grab the gun. The wife dared not move, but at that moment, the bearded man also emerged to threaten the girl using his messy beard. Simone panicked a bit. The beardless wife was not an easy opponent and was ready to strike. The bearded man, in his agitation, pulled out a gun. Thankfully, the awakened Martin burst out just in time, wresting the gun from the man and ending his bearded life. Shaken, Simone and Martin fled the house. Overwhelmed with emotion, Simone broke down crying like a giant baby. This was the first time she had ever hurt someone. Martin comforted her using his words first but muscles later, saying that in a post-apocalyptic world, survival sometimes meant doing the unthinkable. The next day, Simone and Martin finally arrived at Simone's childhood home. The familiar buildings and memories of her youth lifted much of the gloom from Simone's spirit. They chatted as they walked, and as they neared Simone's house, they noticed hunters lurking about the entrance from afar. They quickly took cover. Unexpectedly, the hunters seemed to have anticipated Simone's path. Martin hatched a plan. Simone would go to the back door and wait for an opportunity while he distracted the soldiers at the front. Once Simone was far enough, Martin started firing with the bearded man's pistol. But the enemy's fire was too fierce. Martin could do nothing but take cover behind a car, unable to lift his head. Thanks to his diversion, however, things went more smoothly for Simone. She successfully made her way home unimpeded and found the computer in her father's study. Little did she know, she was already in a sniper's sights. The hunters had laid a trap long ago. The woman holding the gun was Kira, the one who had killed Simone's father previously. What didn't make sense was that she could easily pull the trigger to end her target's life, yet she chose not to. She watched as Simone left with the computer. Due to the intensity of the gunfire, Martin found himself in a passive situation. He was soon knocked down by the soldiers and thrown into a car. However, he didn't give up. He struck up a conversation with the soldiers, using Raz's whereabouts as a pretext. Seizing the opportunity when the soldiers lit a fire, he poured the liquor from his flask onto it, causing immediate chaos. Martin quickly grabbed his backpack and ran for his shitty life. By this time, Simone had been waiting at the agreed-upon location for quite some time. The two finally had a close call and met up. The hunters wanted to send a drone to pursue Martin, but Kira stopped them. Her intentions were unclear, her actions often enigmatic. Thanks to this, Simone and Martin's journey home became much more comfortable. Little did they know, the research facility was also facing many mishaps at this very moment. Patrick never forgot Martin's final instructions to protect the team members here. He casually patrolled the area with his trusty iron rod. During one of his rounds, he stumbled upon a concealed storage area marked with a skull symbol. He pushed the door and entered, discovering an advanced gun-like weapon. Unaware of its function, Patrick decided to consult with Phi. When she too proved unfamiliar with the device, Patrick decided to press the button. A massive shockwave erupted, and all the lights abruptly went out, leaving Patrick feeling uneasy. He He found it hard to believe that such a destructive weapon could be in a small research facility. Meanwhile, Raz, who was in isolation, was approached by a woman wearing a mask. For a reason unknown to him, she stared at him with a look of intense hatred, saying that he killed her brother. Raz tried to defend himself, but the woman insisted she had seen it with her own eyes. She then revealed herself to be Sarah, the sister of the virus expert Jakob. For special reasons, Sarah usually lived in a separate isolation room. On the day of the experiment, she was preparing to visit Jakob when she saw Raz suffering from a major virus outbreak that killed all the experts, including Jakob. Sarah, who had a close relationship with her brother, was unable to accept his sudden death, so she came to accuse Raz. When she noticed someone approaching, Sarah quickly left the isolation chamber, leaving Raz standing in the room, bewildered. Back in her room, Sarah was still distraught. She picked up a knife, contemplating ending her own life, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. So she went back to Raz and asked him to assist her in terminating herself in the same way he had killed her brother. Raz was confused and couldn't understand why she was asking this of him. Sarah removed her oxygen mask and revealed that she had been sick for a long time. Since she was in elementary school, her immune system had been severely compromised. Even a common cold could be lethal to her. She had to live in a sterile environment, and it was only due to her brother's careful care that she hadn't encountered any accidents. After the viral rain disaster, all the surviving residents wanted to leave the virus isolation zone as soon as possible. The authorities opened a rescue channel to a safe area, but the prerequisite was passing a virus test. Sarah's parents passed the test without any trouble, but when it was Sarah's turn, the testing equipment alarmed. Jakob knew that this was due to his sister's immune system disease, not a virus infection. The staff wouldn't listen to his explanation and firmly refused to allow Sarah through. Her parents, with faces full of sorrow, ultimately chose to leave alone. The siblings were stunned. Fortunately, Jakob quickly made a decision. He would stay in the isolation zone to take care of his sister. They spent the next 6 years together, but unexpectedly, Jakob suddenly died. Naturally, Sarah didn't want to live alone. Slowly opening the isolation door, she took steps towards Raz, causing him to become extremely agitated. He yelled at her not to come closer, his veins bulging and a fog of virus erupting from his body. The horrific sight made Sarah retreat, her suicidal thoughts instantly evaporating. Raz, on the other hand, watched the black fog in surprise. The last time the virus erupted, he was unconscious, but this time he saw it clearly. Sarah, from outside the door, said this was how he killed her brother. After hearing this, Raz was saddened. He felt that what Sarah said might be true. He may have killed all the researchers, and his sister lied to everyone. At this moment, Simone and Martin had just returned to the secret research base. She and Phi started searching through computer files. The old photos stored within instantly filled Simone with a sense of melancholy. Those happy times were gone forever. Simone did her best to control her emotions, and finally, in a hidden folder, she found the virus map left by her father. With these data, combined with the pure virus sample inside Raz, the chances of developing an antidote were significant. They were filled with joy, but they were unaware that their every move was being recorded by the computer's camera and transmitted to the boss of the Apollon company. It turned out all of this was a trap set by Apollon. They had let Simone go multiple times before, hoping to confirm the location of the secret research base where Raz was through computer tracking. However, as the female officer, Kira, looked at the building's outline, her expression became complex. Meanwhile, through the left-behind data, Phi had once again realized the terrifying nature of the virus. This virus was highly aggressive. When the host was in an excited state, the virus inside would automatically counterattack, trying to eliminate anything that threatened it. This was the reason why the black fog virus inside Raz would automatically gush out. Phi also discovered that this virus had a strong tendency to mutate. Nobody knew what it would mutate into. It was crucial to develop an antidote as soon as possible. Otherwise, they might face a disaster even worse than the toxic rain. To their surprise, Raz, in a completely calm state, was now able to control the virus inside his body freely. However, he dared not share this secret with anyone. His sister Simone was still trying to develop an antidote for the virus. Until successful, she had to act as if nothing were amiss and keep her brother safely in the isolation room. Raz was acting as if he were perfectly fine. In secret, however, he had his own plans. He quietly sought out Sarah, the only person who had seen him release the virus. Raz wanted her to help in testing how the virus inside him could spontaneously release. If they knew the reason, they could avoid harming more innocent people. After some thought, Sarah agreed to his request. Just then, Leah on the balcony saw a black box slowly descending from the sky. Curiously, she pressed the glowing button and a video popped up. It was a warning from the boss of the Apollon company. He demanded that they hand over Raz within 24 hours and promised to remove the implanted virus capsules from everyone's bodies. However, if they resisted, the company would storm the research base, whose exits had already been blocked by hunters. Under such threats and inducements, everyone was somewhat panicked. The timid boy John suggested that the virus inside Raz might be contagious and better handled by a large company like Apollon to develop an antidote. But Simone stated that the virus inside Raz was controllable and there was no need to worry about contagion. Martin said if they could remove the virus from Raz within 24 hours, all their problems would be solved. But Patrick was still suspicious. If Apollon activated the virus capsules inside them, would they all be doomed? After some thought, Martin concluded it was unlikely. If it were possible, Apollon would have acted already. There might be some limitations to triggering the condition. Patrick suddenly remembered the pulse gun they had found in the secret room. It could instantly destroy all electronic products. He wondered if it could also be used to make the nanocapsules inside their bodies ineffective. Soon enough, they used a drone to test the pulse gun again. The results were satisfying. Even Martin's wrist felt a piercing pain, proving the method was viable. They wanted to try again, but they found the pulse gun had run out of battery. Patrick thought there might be batteries in the secret room where they found the gun. But as soon as he reached the basement, he saw a sneaky figure and immediately chased after it. To his surprise, the figure was very familiar with the terrain and knocked Patrick down, also stealing the pulse gun. As he skillfully replaced the battery and was about to fire, Patrick, in a moment of quick thinking, hit a nearby switch. A heavy iron door fell, and a piercing, high-frequency noise rang out. Clearly, the intruder was more affected and quickly collapsed on the ground. But Patrick was also trapped behind the door and couldn't get out. At this moment, Simone was desperately helping with the antidote, unwilling to give up the only chance to save her brother. Thankfully, Phi had made significant progress beforehand. Not long after, a vial of the virus antidote was finally produced. As for its effectiveness, it had to be tested on infected lab mice first. Disappointingly, the results were discouraging. The mice lost consciousness instantly, indicating a clear failure in the experiment. Simone wanted to give it another try because time was running out. Meanwhile, Raz had taken Sarah to a quiet courtyard. He recalled his previous experiences. Whenever he got angry or was threatened, the virus would overflow from his body. Raz asked Sarah to provoke him to see the effect. She immediately got into the role and portrayed Raz as a ruthless killer, a performance that seemed all too natural. Unable to bear it any longer, the virus inside Raz began to overflow again. This scene was coincidentally spotted by John from upstairs, who ran to inform the others. Everyone saw the scene of the virus spewing out from Raz. Although Simone managed to soothe Raz's emotions in time, the others had already understood that the previous researchers had been killed by an agitated Raz. Faced with everyone's accusations, Simone had to admit her lies. As a result, everyone kept their distance from the siblings. Martin first isolated Raz and then started berating Simone. They were on the verge of disaster to protect Raz, and he nearly killed them all. After venting, he left without looking back. But the person who was most upset was the kind-hearted Leah. She had always treated the team members like family and couldn't understand why Simone had chosen to lie to them. Disheartened, she decided to leave the research base with John, as there was nothing left in the team worth staying for. Simone knew that her actions had deeply hurt her teammates, but she couldn't care less at this moment. All she wanted was to quickly remove the virus from her brother. At this moment, Martin came to propose handing Raz over to Apollon Company, which he thought was the best decision under the circumstances. But Simone disagreed, convinced that they would kill her brother. After listening to Simone, Martin didn't argue any further. He locked Simone in the lab and went off to discuss with Leah the details of handing over Raz. But when Leah objected, insisting that they could not hand Raz over to the company that had killed his father, Leah went to find Simone, and when she opened the lab door, Simone excitedly claimed to have found a way to solve the virus problem. She rushed to find Raz, but to her surprise, the isolation room where Raz had been held was empty. He and Sarah were already on the road to survival in this apocalyptic world. It turned out Sarah had learned from Phi that Raz was about to be handed over and had run to inform him, leading to their decision to leave the research base. Ever since her brother Jakob's death, Sarah had lost the will to live, and she decided to fulfill her wish before she died, to visit the famous local amusement park. She had been longing to go there since childhood, but could only stay at home due to her health condition. Raz, having nowhere else to go, agreed to go with her. They managed to avoid the encircling Apollon company by taking a detour, excitedly setting off towards their destination like two runaway children. Little did they know that back at the base, Simone was frantically packing to go look for them. Seeing this, Martin and Phi said they would also go. They hadn't changed their initial intention of handing Raz over, but knew that no matter who had Raz, he was a crucial part of developing the antidote. So Simone, Martin, and Phi once again embarked on their adventurous journey to find Raz. Fortunately, Raz would always leave some traces of the virus when he was emotionally agitated, so they wouldn't lose their way following these clues. At this moment, Patrick, trapped in the corridor, groped his way to the end, finding a surveillance room with some still functioning equipment. He then found some tools and pried open the heavy iron door. Inside the intruder's backpack, he found many storage cards and realized the intruder came here for the storage cards. In the warehouse, he found a camera and started playing the content from the storage cards. He assumed the people in the video were all staff of the research base. For some unknown reason, they had been implanted with virus capsules from the Apollon company. A large group was conducting human experiments, researching how to extract the virus capsules. Among the tools used was a mysterious pulse gun, but the results were still unsuccessful. The human body simply couldn't withstand the power of the pulse gun. Patrick gleaned an important piece of information from the video. Apparently, the Apollon company couldn't trigger the virus capsules implanted in the body at will. Only when passing through the isolation wall would the virus capsule react. This was merely a measure to prevent survivors from escaping the quarantine area. Patrick noticed two familiar figures in the video, Kira and the just-dead intruder. It turned out that Kira's real identity was a staff member of Jakob's secret research base. She went undercover at Apollon Company to find a way to remove the virus capsules. When she realized that the research base had been discovered, she immediately arranged for her undercover colleague to return and retrieve some crucial information. This information absolutely couldn't fall into Apollo's hands. Kira knew of a secret passage to the research base. In only a few hours, her partner had reached the base. But just as he had packed up all the items, he was discovered by Patrick, with the important storage cards now in Patrick's hands. Patrick was exhilarated at this moment. Removing the virus capsule and leaving the quarantine area had always been his greatest dream. He hoped to find an effective method in the contents of the storage cards. Little did he know the Apollon soldiers surrounding the area were growing impatient. Through the confirmation of infected trees, Kira guessed that Raz had probably escaped. So she decided to split her forces. She would follow the traces to continue the search, while the other soldiers broke into the research base. Although the main gate was sealed, it was no match for their brute force. Leah, who hadn't had a chance to leave yet, heard the noise from above and realized something was wrong. She quickly pulled John and ran towards the basement, just in time to meet Patrick, who was still watching the video. After explaining the situation, Patrick thought of a plan. He led Leah into the isolation room, using the heavy iron door to block the pursuers outside. The bio-warriors in protective suits stormed the research base with the mission to hunt for Raz. Just as they found his companion and were about to charge, they were separated by a heavy iron door. Nobody expected the other side to have a backup plan. After pressing a red button, a piercing noise rang out, and in just a moment, the team of bio-soldiers had all turned into corpses. Patrick and his team had narrowly escaped danger. Meanwhile, Raz, the antibody carrier, was walking towards an amusement park with Sarah. As they passed a cosmetics shop, the two kids, who had never worn makeup before, began to playfully apply it to their faces. It wasn't until they saw soldiers passing outside the door that they realized their journey wasn't as easy as they'd imagined. They ran until they hid in the woods, finally breathing a sigh of relief. Sarah was clearly exhausted, panting heavily. Due to her immune system disease, she had been enduring unimaginable pain for years. Every night, she had to inject antibody drugs, which also brought the risk of anaphylactic shock. Raz watched Sarah nervously, not knowing when she started convulsing, but it turned out to be a joke. This small joke made Raz rush out to calm himself. He seemed to have a realization, as if the virus in his body was more obedient. By the next day, Sarah was clearly weaker. Fortunately, their destination was not far off. They soon arrived at the amusement park, which had long been reduced to ruins and was no longer prosperous. Although they had expected this scene, Sarah couldn't help feeling a bit lost. They decided to go to the highest point to have a look. However, they didn't know how their capricious behavior would cause trouble for others. Simone and her team followed the traces and also arrived at the previous cosmetic shop. Unexpectedly, the lone Martin was held hostage at gunpoint. Simone recognized the bearded man, whose beardless wife had been shot dead by her in his house. However, Martin had only shot the bearded man in the leg, not killing him. The man was still grieving his wife's death and was determined to fulfill her last wish, to find the antibody carrier Raz. Naturally, Simone was unwilling to reveal anything about her brother's whereabouts. Seeing the bearded man losing control with his messy bearded agitated, Martin declared that he could find Raz. Ignoring Simone's curses, he walked out of the shop with the bearded man. Simone then realized Martin had deliberately led the man away to create an opportunity for them to escape. They quickly broke free and arrived at the amusement park. Simone was shouting Raz's name only to attract the bearded man again. It turned out that he and Martin were also there. Fortunately, they had a backup plan. Phi appeared with a gun. Taking advantage of the man's distraction, Martin snatched the weapon but spared his beard. The crisis was temporarily resolved, and the three continued on their way to find Raz. However, Raz and Sarah were oblivious to the commotion in the distance. At that moment, they were on a roller coaster track, overlooking the entire amusement park. Sarah declared this to be the happiest day of her life, with her only regret being that she had never been kissed by a man. Raz rejected her without a second thought. His painful past was still vividly etched in his mind, leaving him too afraid to have any physical contact with anyone. To everyone's surprise, Sarah suddenly climbed onto the railing, intending to end her miserable life. Raz was frantic. He swore that once the virus inside him was gone, he would make sure Sarah was happy every day. With these words, he was able to dispel the cloud of darkness from her heart. Just then, Simone and her two companions found them. Both of them realized that their beautiful yet willful day was coming to an end. As they prepared to return to base with everyone, Kira from the Apollon company suddenly appeared. She was determined to take Raz away. Seeing that no one was responding, she grabbed Sarah as a hostage. But this act completely enraged Raz. The veins in the boy's body quickly bulged as if he had become a different person. The virus within him erupted. Under the pressure, Kira was terrified and fled in haste for her shitty life. After this incident, Phi also realized Apollo's unscrupulous practices for achieving their goals. She finally changed her mind and agreed with Simone that it was right not to hand over her brother to them. However, Martin didn't agree. The terrifying scene of Raz's virus outbreak during the day was still fresh in his memory. He thought that Raz was akin to a ticking time bomb, and it would be better to hand him over to Apollo. This was completely opposite to Simone's thoughts. Seeing that neither could convince the other, Martin packed his belongings and left the camp alone. He was utterly disappointed. When he returned to the research base, he happened to run into Patrick, who told him about a significant discovery. In a video recording, the staff found a nearby Apollon lab, where there could be equipment capable of removing the capsule virus. At this point, Martin didn't want to stay with Simone and her brother, so he decided to go to the lab with Patrick. Not long after the two left, Simone and her brother returned to the research base. As for Martin's abrupt departure, Simone wasn't surprised. Since she chose to protect her brother, she was prepared to lose Martin. At this point, Simone focused on developing the antidote. Her inspiration for the antidote solution was verified by Phi to be quite feasible, but it also carried certain risks. If not handled properly, Raz could lose his life. But Simone had no other choice. She remembered her father's dying words. If there was no antidote, she must kill her brother immediately, or else the world would be doomed because of him. Phi didn't say much and began to cultivate the virus antidote according to the new method. However, Raz's condition was not good at this time. Since he returned from his trip, he often saw his younger self persistently advising him not to inject the antidote, saying that his power would weaken. Perhaps the virus had started to permeate his brain. Raz suddenly remembered a phrase the boss of Apollon said to him when he was a child. With time, the power inside him would become increasingly strong, and Raz could save all mankind. But even if his words were true, Raz didn't forget his promise to Sarah, to remove the virus inside him and stride forward together. However, as time went on, the voice of the little boy in his head became clearer. Raz felt his head was about to explode. He finally couldn't help but rush into the lab to take out the unfinished antidote. Despite the little boy's obstruction, he injected it into himself. Raz began to tremble uncontrollably. Apparently, the antidote did have some effect. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, he saw Simone's figure in a daze. Fortunately, the dosage he injected wasn't much, so it didn't cause any harm, but rather felt like a drill. However, Raz felt as if the virus had fused more with his body. He began to question if this antidote was really useful. Phi was clearly confident. She had checked Raz's blood condition, and the detectable amount of virus had significantly decreased. But Simone clearly felt that her brother started to resist the injection of the antidote. Seeing that the virus antidote was about to be completed and to prevent any accidents, Simone mixed medicine powder into Raz's food, deciding to inject the antidote while he was unconscious. When an unconscious Raz was strapped to the experiment table, Simone and the others knew that the final moment was about to arrive. Elsewhere, Martin and Patrick also found themselves facing a test of life and death. They encountered two survivors scavenging for food as they were nearing the Apollon lab. Thankfully, they didn't approach to greet them as a group of hunters suddenly appeared and captured the survivors. Martin was puzzled, wondering if the Apollon company was still kidnapping people for experiments. Out of curiosity, he followed and saw many survivors gathered in a square where the boss of Apollon casually displayed a picture of Raz. As it turned out, he was calling on everyone to hunt for Raz at the secret research base, claiming that Raz was the only hope for a cure. The boss also promised that whoever successfully captured Raz could leave the quarantine zone at any time. This proposition excited everyone, readying them for the hunt. However, Martin had no intention of going back to report this development to his companions. He continued towards the Apollon lab. After crossing a forest teeming with the virus, the two finally reached their destination. They were surprised to see the scene. It had no guards at the entrance and seemed to have been abandoned for many years. The two men cautiously entered, finding the hall filled with sealed cabins, all containing dark virus samples. Was this a lab for cultivating the virus? Martin felt a sense of dread and was preparing to leave when they heard a noise from ahead. Following the sound to the innermost room, they were shocked to find a mutated man wrapped in the virus, lying on the bed, crying out in pain. Then, a frantic-looking worker entered. He seemed not to notice Martin and Patrick as he injected a vial of medicine into the mutated man. Apparently, he was experimenting with a virus antidote, and the results would be confirmed in 1 minute and 53 seconds. Martin completely lost his calm. He tried to leave only to find the door locked, and even their weapons were unable to break it down. He worried that if the antidote failed, they would also become infected. As time was running out, Martin grabbed the lab worker and used his hand to open the door. At that very moment, the medicine took effect. Without a doubt, the antidote experiment had failed. The frenzied lab worker told the two that this place was originally an institution for developing a cure, but each experiment only made the virus more aggressive. All the other researchers had died, leaving him alone. He pleaded with Martin to end his life, but the two men were too frightened to deal with this. They turned and ran, not stopping until they had fled the lab. Afterward, Martin calmed down. He felt they should rush back to the research base to prevent Simone from treating her brother. The experience in this lab already showed the outcome. Simone's antidote would only make the virus in Raz's body stronger, eventually killing everyone in the base. But was there still enough time to get there? On the lab table, Raz suddenly woke up from his unconsciousness. Simone quickly explained that she was about to inject the antidote. Unexpectedly, Raz became extremely agitated, shouting that the injection could not be administered. With the syringe already nearing him, Raz's veins bulged in an instant, and the passive virus inside his body was activated again. This time, the black fog was so intense that even he couldn't control it, and it filled the room in an instant. Simone was frightened. Despite holding the antidote, she didn't know how to deal with the current situation. Leah witnessed everything from outside and couldn't stand it anymore. After a look at John, she resolutely rushed into the terrifying black fog. The virus seemed to find a fresh host and quickly poured into Leah's greasy body. Simone seized this opportunity to circle behind Raz and inject the antidote into his body. It was as if the world fell silent in an instant. Raz immediately fell unconscious, and sadly, Leah left Simone forever, waving a painful goodbye to her old friend. The most heartbroken was John, who was closest to her. It felt like his soul was being hollowed out. This accident cast a shadow over everyone. When Raz woke up and knew what had happened, he fell into endless self-blame. When he went to pay tribute to Leah, he ran into the despondent John. He was going to comfort him, but unexpectedly, the other was filled with resentment and accused that if not for him, Leah wouldn't have died, which made Raz feel even worse. The test data came out quickly. The virus inside Raz had disappeared. This news relieved everyone a lot. Simone couldn't wait to tell her brother the good news. However, when she went to the isolation room, she didn't see anyone. After searching around, Simone asked John if he had seen her brother. Surprisingly, he told her that Raz was taken away. Simone didn't react for a moment. She then heard him continue, saying that everything was her and her brother's fault. It turned out that just 10 minutes ago, two unfamiliar survivors quietly approached the research base. They had previously been beguiled by Apollon and came to capture Raz. Seeing John, who was still grieving alone, they wanted to force him to reveal Raz's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, he cooperated very well and even volunteered to lead them to Raz. As a result, Raz, who had just cheered up a bit under Sarah's comfort in the isolation room, was quickly captured by the two survivors, and Sarah was also implicated. After hearing this, Simone panicked. She rushed towards the back door of the base. At this point, Raz and Sarah had been taken to the exit hall. The boy knew clearly that going with them to Apollon would not end well. Suddenly, he began to tremble violently, letting out a painful howl. The two survivors thought he was about to have a virus outbreak and quickly ran outside in fear. Sarah reacted quickly, shutting the door behind them. Raz stood up as if nothing had happened. It turned out that everything before was just a ruse. When he learned from his sister that the antidote had worked, he couldn't help but smile, because now he could have a super friendship with Sarah. The two understood each other without words and went into a private room intending for a kiss. Just as they were about to make a move, the door suddenly swung open. Simone and Phi rushed in to disrupt their smelly moment. It turned out that the two had noticed an enemy drone approaching from upstairs. They believed it wouldn't be long before they'd arrive. They had to leave immediately. As everyone was preparing to open the back door, they found it already surrounded. They had no choice but to run towards the basement. Suddenly, Simone heard someone calling her. She turned around to see Martin, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. He no longer had the determination of his past, promising that he would protect everyone. This left Simone very puzzled, not knowing what Martin had gone through in the past few days. It's then revealed that he had been at the Apollon lab, where he realized how terrible the virus was. He was preparing to run back to the base to warn everyone when Patrick accidentally tripped. After Martin bandaged him up, they were surrounded by a group of hunters. They quickly arrived at a temporary camp. Unexpectedly, there were quite a few survivors gathered there. Martin curiously looked around, and the soldiers directly brought him before the boss of the Apollon company. The boss tried to persuade Martin to bring Raz here, but Martin understood now. Even if they got Raz, they wouldn't be able to produce an antidote. The boss showed no emotion after hearing this, as he already knew this outcome. But he told Martin that since they couldn't produce an antidote, everyone should adapt to the virus. Raz was a perfect example. This was his real intention all along. He then ordered the execution of Martin and Patrick. Luckily, the one executing the order, Kira, was a double agent. She took them to a secluded forest. Kira told them to follow her if they didn't want to die. It turned out that a few years ago, Kira and her mother were cornered by a group of hunters. Her mother suddenly had an idea, pointing Kira's gun at her own head and pulling the trigger. To the hunters watching from afar, it looked like Kira had executed a fugitive. The boss of Apollon was pleased with this, and Kira naturally became one of the hunters. Over the years, she realized the boss's ruthlessness. She knew that Raz couldn't fall into his hands no matter what. That's why she intentionally let Martin and Patrick go. She also knew that a large group of survivors were headed towards the secret research base. They had to organize support as soon as possible, otherwise everyone at the base would be killed. Apollon had lost a batch of soldiers in a previous raid on the research base. This time, to be on the safe side, they were actually using innocent survivors to perform the dangerous tasks. Martin was also anxious. It was only now that he realized how important Simone was to him. He made a vow that he would not let any harm come to her. Kira knew she couldn't enter through the main gate, so she took Martin to a secret passageway. Her undercover partner had previously used this entrance to infiltrate the base. For safety reasons, Martin asked Patrick to stand watch at the entrance to prevent an ambush. He and Kira then snuck into the research base through the tunnel. Suddenly, the voice of defected John resounded from the speaker. He had noticed their movements from the surveillance room and asked Martin to bring Simone and her brother here. Without much thought, Martin turned around to find them. He quickly ran into Simone. After a brief exchange of greetings, Martin planned to meet up with John in the control room and then escape from the base through the passageway. However, halfway there, he ran into Kira. She was very familiar with the mechanisms here and guessed that John would likely trigger a noise device to wipe everyone out once he got Simone and her brother here. Recalling John's previous collusion with outsiders and his harm to Raz, Simone thought this was a real possibility. So she dared not approach the iron gate and let Martin go alone to try and convince John to leave. But John sensed his plan had been exposed and decided to turn on the noise device regardless. Even though Simone and the others were far away, they still felt dizzy from the sound. Luckily, Kira quickly shot and destroyed the speakers. Everyone had to leave in a hurry towards the direction of the tunnel, leaving John alone in the control room. In a daze, he seemed to see Leah persuading him to stop. This woke him up, and he quickly ran outside. But by then, the enemies were already close. He could only hide behind a canvas to narrowly escape. Simone and the others in the tunnel weren't so lucky. Gunshots from pursuers kept echoing from behind. After Kira took down a few soldiers from her hiding spot, they noticed that Sarah had been shot at some point and was now sitting on the ground, unable to move. Raz quickly rushed over to check on her, his eyes filled with sorrow. Sarah seemed to know that her end was near. She asked Raz to fulfill her last regret before she died. After their passionate kiss, Sarah closed her eyes to meet her ancestor. Martin urged everyone to evacuate quickly, but Raz was already in a rage. The veins on his body bulged, and a poisonous mist began to spout from him. With a wave of his hand, several strong men died instantly. But this was not enough to quell Raz's anger. He returned to the base, deliberately diving into the enemy crowd, leaving a poisonous mist in his wake. Everyone he passed fell dead. Simone was confused, since they hadn't detected any virus in Raz before, so why was it acting up now? She wondered if it was because the virus had completely fused with his body. Raz was clearly more powerful now. In just a few minutes, all the invading enemies were killed. As Simone followed her brother, she saw the dead bodies everywhere and felt uneasy. Especially when she noticed that Raz felt no guilt for his actions, she was reminded of her father's dying words. If the antidote was ineffective, they must kill Raz to stop him from destroying the world. So Simone picked up a weapon from the ground, which made Raz even angrier. He felt that his father, like everyone else, couldn't accept him as a monster. He then slowly approached Simone. Luckily, Martin appeared just in time to distract Raz. Raz threw a ball of virus at him, but suddenly a gunshot rang out. Simone had fired her weapon, but surprisingly, Raz's wound healed almost immediately. However, he didn't attack Simone and Martin again. Instead, he left in resignation. Unexpectedly, not far ahead, the boss of the Apollon company was standing in the grass. It was then that Raz realized that perhaps, in the whole world, only this man truly understood and accepted him. As the scene shifts, Simone and the others are bidding their last farewell to the departed Sarah. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, Sarah comes back to life. With that, Season 2 of this drama comes to an end. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.